Are you ready to listen to my dad Joe and Uncle Justin talk about sports? Now on with the show.
The Joe Mays and J-Raff Show is brought to you by Mays Sandwich Shop, which have been serving the greater West Lawn area delicious food for over 70 years. You are listening to the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show.
Boring.
A weekly podcast about sports since 2011,
Don't you ever get tired of being wrong all the time?
with a focus on football.
36-yard line of Philly, shotgun snap to Hurts, dropping back, only one person rushing, Hurts looking, standing still, winding up, long pass, it lands at the 20, no one is there, zeros on the clock, it's over, the Chiefs have won! The Chiefs have won Super Bowl 57 on a game-winning field goal, trailing at 10. At the halftime stop, 24-14, they go on to win 38-35. What a game.
Now, here are your hosts, Joe Mays and Justin Raffoff. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. I am one of your hosts, Joe Mays, and here with me is not only my co-host, Justin Raffoff, but also our special guest who we've been meaning to have on the show for literally a year now.
Almost a full calendar.
Yeah, almost a full calendar year.
We got it in before the next champion.
We did. I mean, technically, there's nothing in our terms and conditions on the challenge that we have to do it within a calendar year, but I mean that just would make the most sense if we did do it that way. But here is Dr. Andy Hoffert. Appreciate you joining us. Congratulations on the win last year.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a fluke, 100% fluke. But I will enjoy the win.
So honestly, it looked for at least a time, and honestly, March Madness was so wacky this year, I haven't even looked at the bracket challenge because I think last week we decided Kevin Quimby was the winner no matter what happened in the Final Four. I thought you were doing pretty well this year.
I was up there. I think I may have ended up points-wise like in third place.
Okay,
with the
yeah.
legend.
Okay.
So,
Well, that's 2 years in a row that you're up there pretty high.
well, and again, this was a fluke.
I was going to say, so maybe it's not a fluke.
I don't know. We're getting close to a trend,
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Third time.
Correlation, causation. So, but yeah, it's great to finally have you on. We've been talking about it for a while. I got you the shirt, I think, last April or May. It was,
I did get the shirt. Yeah.
but yeah, just we haven't been able to sync up. And it's tough when Justin and I are doing Bulldog Hour in the fall. We don't get to do this show and just talk about, whatever sports topics we want to talk about. Usually it's football in some manner. We're big on NFL, but the other thing that Justin and I love to talk about is what you want to talk about tonight, and that's reflected by your attire.
Yeah. So yeah, actually, this was a coincidence. We'll call it.
Coincidence. Okay. Well,
Not planned.
besides my wardrobe consists of Wilson and Penn State.
That's
so
no problem. That's-
yeah, we all kind
I
of
was going
share
to say,
the same.
we're kind of in the same boat there.
Yeah. So yeah, we're gonna talk Penn State football tonight, and obviously we're in kind of, I guess, close to the middle part of Penn State's spring practice. I know it's been underway. Justin and I are always reading Audrey Schneider's pieces in The Athletic, which we talk about all the time. But it's wonderful to be able to talk about Penn State football in the spring, just with another fan. So I know you did some prep work for us. So you have a few things you want to discuss, throw our way, and open up discussion. And while we do that, we are going to have to continue our playthrough on the college football game because we'll never finish it if we don't. But that's why it's great to have you on tonight, because one of us will get to sit next to you and talk Penn State football while the other tries to not lose to Notre Dame.
Yeah,
So,
number one ranked Notre Dame. So
Yikes.
yeah.
yeah.
So
You can tell it's an old game.
yeah, right. Get those shots, and your neighbor might not be too happy about that.
He will not be happy about that.
So I'm actually going to be up first. I'm the offense, so I'm going to hop over to the gaming chair and get us underway. But Andy, why don't you tee up Justin and you guys get started talking about Penn State football?
Yeah, great. I really appreciate the opportunity. I mean, Penn State football is something that's near and dear to my heart. It's kind of a family tradition for us, and I know you guys feel the same way. So When we were trying to kind of think of topics, or I was trying to think of a topic for this show, I would say, NCAA basketball, like I said, that's a bit of a fluke for me. I'm not somebody that really tracks that a lot, unless Penn State's playing. In Philadelphia, they say you're like 4 for 4. When it comes to Penn State sports, I'm like 18 for 18 or whatever. It's like, if Penn State's playing, I'll watch it.
Yes.
If there's an opportunity to go to a game, I'll go to it. So
Right. Yeah, I find myself like on social media following like pretty much all the sports teams because I just, obviously some of them are easier to follow, but yeah, I find myself rooting for Penn State no matter what I'm rooting for them in.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and wrestling recently.
Oh, yes.
Huge.
Yes. Yes.
That's been something I've been following, obviously, since Kale took over, and that's been really exciting to watch.
Yeah, been remarkable. Joey and I like to talk about, we got up to a match a few years ago. My dad and I have been to a number of matches. Like, it's just, it's nothing like it. And we've been, in recent years, I've been up to the duels at the Bryce Jordan Center, which are awesome, and it's really cool. But there's nothing like going to a big time dual meet in Rec Hall when it is packed. And I like to think, and again, my wrestling fandom is really rather limited. It's grown over the last decade. But a few years ago, when they favored Ohio State,
Is that the Bo Nickel pin or?
Well, Bo Nickel ended up. I think that might have been the year Bo Nickel pinned the guy in the championship then.
Yeah.
But they end up winning. But like Kyle Snyder won his match, but didn't major the guy, and so like Penn State won like 19-18, and like it's just you have a packed house like screaming like, oh man, it's just nuts.
Well, the crazy thing is like I remember, I graduated from Penn State in December of 2000, so my time frame there. About fall of '96 through 2000. So, I remember.
Oh, you were there during that Minnesota game.
I think that's on my list.
Oh no!
You're right. Yeah. So I just remember being in Rec Hall, like kind of being around campus and being able to just walk in on the floor of a wrestling match, like in progress, just kind of stand there and watch part of it. Like, it was not the thing that it is now. I mean, it's always been big.
Right. It's been big.
Yeah.
But yeah, not like it is. And that's great, when it's great for the program, it's great for the school, athletic department as a whole. Love it.
But we're here to talk about football.
We are.
Well, any Penn State
Yes.
topic is good to go here. I mean, we don't cut corners there. And Justin got me into wrestling, so we like to talk wrestling. But yeah, Penn State football. Let's do that.
Yeah. So just because of the time of the year leading up to the spring game, I thought this would be a great opportunity to kind of do a little bit of a PSU retrospective, a football retrospective, to think back to some memorable games. And I'm sure you've got, obviously you've been going to games since you were, I don't know how old, but for me it's been as long as I can remember.
Yeah, I always forget what year the first game was. I know what game it is, so I can look it up, but first game I ever went to was when they beat BYU with Ty Detmer on a Saturday night. It was like I think it might have been an 8:30 kickoff. Like, it was super late. But our neighbor in Jonestown had offered my dad the tickets. He had them, couldn't go. So my dad and I drove up and got back. And I was probably younger than. Well, I know I was younger than Austin because we lived in Jonestown. Yeah. We moved after second grade, so I was like, maybe 7 or 8, up going to the 8. It was a late game, but it was. Absolutely, and they destroyed them, and it was awesome. But
yeah. I honestly, if I try to think back to my first game, I don't think I can remember. I mean, I mentioned to you before, my mom grew up in State College.
Right.
We went up to my grandparents' house all the time, so we were. I mean, as far back as I can remember, we were at the white games. We were at regular season games. So it's really hard to think of the first one, but I do have some distinct memories of very memorable games, good or bad.
Right.
So these are things that are just kind of etched in my memory. And the caveat that I'll throw out there is, a lot of these memories are now approaching 24, 25 years ago. So some of the details are a little fun. I'll say it that way. And some of the details I may just have interpreted in this way.
We get it. We get it.
But I picked 4 games to talk about, and then the other thing I wrote down just some over the time that I've been a Penn State fan, just thinking about some of those memorable players that have kind of stood out in my mind. So the first game that I'll talk about, and you and I were just talking about this game actually, was Penn State Notre Dame 2007.
Yes.
The first official all-stadium White House game. They call it White House.
Yes.
But the really the kind of the full stadium origin of the whiteout.
Right.
I remember I was in the south end zone up in the upper deck. My dad had some tickets up there. I think your dad's tickets were pretty close to
So yes, that's where our tickets are now.
Okay.
I sat for that game. I was in Dennis and Joyce Mays' seats, like in like the northwest corner-ish, like on the side. But yeah, that's where I was, because so I was there, and I don't know if Dennis and Joyce were in those seats for that game or not. I'm not exactly sure, but I remember walking. I was walking by myself because my dad and I think was sitting with Al in the south end zone and stuff. But I was like pinned up against the fence where Notre Dame like walks through the lower, like pinned up against. That was an experience. That's never happened to me before. Never happened to me since. That was an experience. Just the not so welcoming committee was out in full force. But man, that was a fun one.
Guess where Joey was for that game? In Indiana.
Oh.
I mean, I talked about it with my coworkers at the climate office leading up to that game. No, I don't believe. I mean, I was at Purdue, so it's not like any of them were Notre Dame apologists or anything like that.
Yeah.
But they were actually they were probably cheering for Penn State, being all Purdue people. But I remember the lead up to that game was great. That was Jimmy Clausen, right?
That was
Yeah.
That was the big. I don't know if it was his debut. At least
I think it might have been his first road game.
Yeah.
Right.
It was definitely that first season, because that was the hype coming into the game.
Right.
What was Jimmy Clausen going to do? I cannot remember who that was Anthony Morelli, right? Anthony Morelli was the quarterback.
Yeah, that was
at
Anthony
that
Morelli.
time. Austin Scott.
Yes.
Austin Scott was the running back.
Yep.
And I remember, I remember distinctly I think that was the first time I heard Zombie Nation played during.
You know what? I don't recall. I thought they were playing that while I was there, and that would have been the fall after I graduated.
Well, that would have been the first time I heard it.
That you heard it in person. Yeah. Okay.
And just kind of experienced
Yeah.
that from being inside the stadium.
Yes. Yeah. So that's a good one. That all White House event is fantastic. So what's your next one?
So I have a couple throwback games to go back a little
Okay.
bit further.
All right.
And I did have the Minnesota game.
Yeah.
Minnesota.
We don't have to talk about it, though.
1999. And what I remember about that game, and
That is a student section
I was
memories.
student section, at that time, and we, the student section was obviously completely different than it is now.
Yeah.
I mean, it was.
Well, the stadium's different than it was now.
It was on the
than it is
side.
now.
Yeah, it was around the 20-yard line to the 35-yard line, somewhere in that range. On the, I guess, is that the east side?
Yes.
I
I'm
think that's
terrible
the east, I think that's
without.
the east side,
I
yeah.
really need a
But-
compass to orient myself.
So our group would always send people ahead of time to wait, and so we would always be in the first 3 rows
Yeah.
of the student section. So I remember being in that section and standing there, and the whole game. This is LeVar Arrington. This is Brandon Short.
Yeah,
this
this is
Corey
an incredible
Brown,
team.
This is like an amazing defense. So it was close the whole time, and they're driving down. They're getting ready to kick that field goal with seconds remaining, and I just remember, like in my heart of hearts, thinking to myself, LeVar's going to block this. Like
That's
it's
what-
fine.
that's what you hope
we are
for.
Fine.
That's
LeVar's
what you
gonna
want to
block this.
happen.
No big deal, and it doesn't happen. And I just remember the entire stadium just silent, just the deafening silence.
Was that a walk-off or was there time left?
No, that was a walk.
Walk-off.
From what I recall, yeah. And it was just like all that anticipation. Everybody just expected that we were going to win that game, and people just didn't move. It was a little creepy, to be honest. They were all just kind of standing there
Like what just happened?
Yeah.
Those are the worst. Those are the worst. Like what just happened moments. It was a completely different scenario. I have felt that way a couple times, but honestly, the biggest one was the loss, and I don't remember the year, but the loss to Maryland when they refused to shake our hands.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
Was that
And
2015?
I think it was 2015 because I was up there for the day. My wife and young child are at home, and I am just
Fuming.
ripping into myself walking out. Like, why am I wasting my time? We lost to Maryland. Like, and it wasn't, like, it was the whole thing from them not shaking hands before that to all that stuff. Now, I love the stories that come on now about how much, like, every time they play, like, Maryland, and people are like, I don't know. And they're like, no, don't ever forget. James Franklin hates Maryland.
Never forget.
Because of the way they kind of screwed him over. And his buddy, in Friedgen, like, who put them in, at least in my term, put them on the map in terms of football. And then, like, to just kind of, like, rid themselves of him. But, like, so, like, Penn State's gotten their revenge, like, in the year since then. And that's great. But, like, that game made me, like, I won't say question my fandom, but question the actions that I take based on my fandom. Because I'm like, I can't put myself through this to lose to Maryland. Like, it stinks when you lose to a team that's better than you, but like, you know what, that happens.
And
sometimes.
Maryland's not bad.
I knew they weren't better. I knew they weren't, and like, it was just frustrating.
That's the kind of game, and my wife and my family, it's a little embarrassing, but they refuse to watch games with me now.
One of us.
Just because of like it can make or break my weekend. Like,
We completely understand. So you'll
We just had this conversation.
Right.
I think the week before, like 3 weeks ago.
you won't find you won't be surprised by this at all. But when I was in college, like, my mom would find a reason to call, like, every day. Like, and there'd be something, but there'd be a reason to call every day. When Penn State would lose,
No call.
I wouldn't hear from my parents for days. Because they just knew I needed my space. Like, he needs his space, we'll let him be.
I think people are starting to understand that about me a little bit. Like, I don't need the phone call after a loss asking me how I feel about the loss. That's not going to go well.
Right.
It's just not.
Right.
So let's just back away.
I used to joke with my dad that the Phillies could win all week and then they would lose on Saturdays just so that people could ask him about the Phillies on Sundays. Like, that's the last thing I want to do is talk about it.
Yeah.
Like, no, I want to bury that sorrow and that, like, things deep down inside. It'll manifest itself later in some other form.
Yeah.
But, like, I don't want to talk about this. Like, oh gosh. But the losses, they stick with us.
They
like,
absolutely do.
because, like,
Absolutely. Well,
gosh.
and like you said, that Maryland loss, I think, forever. Like, there are a number of teams in the Big Ten that we play that we just expect to beat. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And
No
of
matter
course, is
what.
one of them.
No matter what.
And
Right.
Maryland, honestly, still is one of them.
Yes.
But I don't care. I really want to beat them every single time.
Yes.
I was at Maryland. I don't remember what year that was. We beat them like 52-9.
Oh, yes, yes.
A drubbing.
Like 2019 or
Yes.
something?
It was
Oh,
pretty
gosh.
recent. Yeah. And just being in College Park, watching that game and like destroying them, and our backup quarterbacks
Yes.
are running
Yes.
running touchdowns in and everything.
Yeah.
That was just cathartic.
Oh, those are the best. Yeah, I remember that completely. Those are the type of wins that just feel good, So, sorry, I gotta tweak some mic settings here. Make sure we can hear everyone. So, what's next on your list?
So another game I had down that in timeline is pretty close in proximity to the Minnesota game we talked about.
Okay.
The year before that, Halloween, 1998, Illinois, LeVar Leap.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
okay,
yes.
a positive one.
Positive one,
in
yes, not a loss.
proximity. Yes, I see that replayed. I think they have to play it every year.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we saw it a lot this year as they started to make the comparisons with Abdul Carter, the way he's been playing wearing that number. And then of course,
well,
Michael
when we
wearing
had
that number.
when we had the gladiator walkout music, and
Yes.
they would be showing it there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what I remember about that game is seeing that live and like not understanding what I just saw.
Right.
Like,
You couldn't
was that even
comprehend.
legal? Like, can you do that? and then watching it on the replay like over and over again.
Yeah, the timing of that is just
Unbelievable.
it's surreal. So that's a great one.
But that kind of cemented the legend of LeVar Arrington. I mean, I remember we started a LeVar for Butkus campaign like immediately at that day. We made T-shirts and everything. We had a whole thing going.
Yeah, LeVar's one. I mean, when he was playing at Penn State, Justin and I were 14, 15 years old. So
Yeah,
that was like
yeah.
prime Penn State cheering. You know,
Yeah.
as a kid, as a middle school, high school student. So yeah, those late '90s teams were big. Obviously, starting in '94, that's when I can vividly remember like the entire season, '94
Yeah.
season, with Carey being up there. But my first game was actually in '93. I was at the incredibly wet, rain-soaked Beaver Stadium for the Illinois. Penn State beat Illinois in '93, and that was my first game. But '94 is the one I can like remember from that point on, like just every single game, just watching and being involved in every single game. But do you have one more on that list?
One more game that's a little bit of an outlier.
Okay.
But it is etched in my memory, and it was Appalachian State.
Oh gosh.
The one that was the too close for
Overtime,
comfort.
Too close for comfort. And so here's the story. So we were going up for that game, and what I've done recently, since I have a family now, we got kids were taking these games, lots of people. We'll typically go up for some of those early season,
Yeah.
Yep.
Like
no-brainer
Delaware.
games. Yeah. So we can get pretty cheap tickets. There's 5 of us now. My brother, his family. So we all go up for this game. I don't even know how many total there were in our group, but we didn't have enough tickets for everybody. We just figured we'll get some from a scalper
yeah,
outside
sure.
the stadium, no problem. So most of our family had it. We needed 2 more tickets. So I go up to the scalper, and he tries to sell me, pretty decent tickets, but he's upcharging me. I'm like,
Come on.
it's Appalachian State. Come on. So he gave me face value at least. I got in. We were we weren't too maybe 15, 20 rows off the field.
Okay.
Down in kind of that northwest section.
All right.
And as the game goes on, and we just keep tripping over ourselves.
Yes.
Mistake,
Constantly,
and
yeah.
It's like, come on. Like at some point, you always think, all right, listen.
They're gonna
we
calm
are
down.
Penn State. They are Appalachian State. Like, we're gonna pull this out. This is gonna happen. Like, eventually, we'll settle in. Like, it was very early in the season. We'll, the offense will get going, and it just never.
No, it never
happened.
came.
There were some stars in that game. I mean, I think KJ Hamler had a couple touchdowns in that game.
Well, I want to say, ended up being relatively high scoring, right? It was in the 30s,
yeah.
right?
Yeah,
It
Yes.
was like 38, 35 or
Yes,
something like that.
yeah. Well, and it was sealed on an interception in, was it double overtime?
I know it was overtime. I don't recall how many it was, though. But I just remember, Justin and I have been coaching West Middle School football for many years now, and the head coach, Anton Fernsler, he was like, don't overlook Appalachian State. Don't overlook Appalachian
Well,
State.
and that was the fear going into that, because that was a year or two after they had upset Michigan.
Right.
So
right.
that starts going through your mind, like, as much as we made fun of Michigan. after
Right.
that,
Right. Right.
Well,
You're like,
yeah,
don't
Don't
you
let
know
the
what?
team be us.
Believe it or not, that Appalachian State win over Michigan at the Big House was in 2007.
Yeah,
Oh,
because
really?
that was
Yeah, because it was Chad's
wasn't
senior
it?
year.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, so that was a while before that.
Yeah, but you
still,
you
that's
always
etched
know,
in your
right? You
memory.
always know,
Right.
right? Yeah, that game.
That was rough.
Yeah. Oh man.
But yeah, that, again, etched in my memory. And
Honest-
I felt personally responsible because of just jinxing us,
Right.
by talking to that scout.
Shaking down the
I
scalper.
I always am so stressed when we're up there and like you're tailgating and you're talking to people and like, oh yeah, we're gonna run away with this game. Like no matter who it is, I'm just like, how? Why? Why would you say that?
out loud.
Yes, we
Instant
should.
jinx,
Like
yeah.
why would you say that? Like
Yeah,
no,
I hate that.
No.
Yeah.
Oh man, no. I'm always like the opposite. I'm like
I'm worried. I'm worried.
I'm filling my head with the coach speak of like I just don't know how we win this game. Like oh
Yeah.
man.
So, can you guys, off the top of your heads, think of any other, really memorable games that stuck
Oh,
out?
yeah.
I know which one he's gonna say. I know
So,
which one he's gonna
yeah,
say.
I was a student. I was a junior for the 2005 Penn State Ohio State game. So
Okay, Justin called it.
Yep,
yeah,
yep.
that-
I
that
told him that
one,
one
like,
before.
that's one of my top sports moments of all time. Like ones that I've been at in person. It's hard to top that just because of it hadn't been a great 4 years or so for Penn State football. So for that team to do what they did. I mean, you could kind of see it building in 2004. The defense was outstanding, one of the best in the nation, but the offense was so pathetic that everyone overlooked them, because I think Penn State went 4-7 my sophomore year in 2004 with the last year of Zach Mills. It just wasn't good, but that entire defense basically came back and was just as good, and the offense came alive when they finally went to Michael Robinson, and you also got those freshman phenoms in at wide receiver. So that was just a fantastic experience in 2005, and it was, I feel like the high point, despite winning the Orange Bowl over Florida State in multiple overtimes, that Ohio State game is what everyone points to during that season. I know earlier there was that Northwestern win, which made things possible at Northwestern.
Right.
But unfortunately, the week after Ohio State is when Chad Henne got his
You had to bring
2-second
that up.
revenge there on.
Justin and I were talking to that before the show. We were talking about some difficult memories that come along with that Michigan game. I can remember I was at a wedding in Florida, watching it at a bar during the reception, standing there like screaming,
Screaming, "This is the worst day ever!"
Yeah. Well, and everybody in the wedding were all Penn State grads too, which I don't know why we scheduled a wedding for that day, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah,
that's rough.
Yeah, that one sticks out for me. Like, I wasn't there, but I was at Penn State for that one, which was fun. I told you before, there were 3 of us that had gone up from Duquesne. We'd driven up. I had 2 tickets secured, but like, I'm not gonna leave one person, so the 3 of us watched. That was a fun one. One that comes to me a lot. We talked about the Orange Bowl. That was fun.
Yeah, Justin and I ran into each other without even knowing we were there.
Without knowing, like, we ran into each other down there. We ran into people from Columbia while we were there. That was a fun trip. But the 2012 last game of the season against Wisconsin, when they wore the Maui numbers on the side of the helmet.
Is that bunch of fires?
Yes,
Bunch of fires.
and they win in overtime, and like they put the number up, like just all the things that went into that game made that like one of the most memorable games, and it's senior day, but it's over Thanksgiving break, so like there's a good crowd there, but it's not full, but like that is one of those games where like that'll stick with me forever to like fight and win that one. Few years later, when they beat Michigan in overtime,
I think that was the next year.
And I'm screaming because I see Pat Zerbe, Wilson kid, is in, at fullback, and I'm just like, we're gonna score. Pat Zerbe's in the game, and people around me are looking at me like you're crazy. And then he like pancakes the guy, and we score. Bill Belton runs into the end zone, and I'm like, I told you we were gonna score. But that was the one where Hack threw it up to Allen Robinson and made the catch. Like that was awesome. Like, so games like that stick out. But yeah, one that was a negative. My buddy and I, my freshman year of college, we drove down to the Capital One Bowl to play against Auburn, right? And that's when Auburn had Cadillac Williams and Ronnie Brown, and I forget, was it Jason Campbell was the quarterback? They were all underclassmen though, and they lose. Larry Johnson does virtually nothing in that game, but the field was soaked because it had poured the day before, like nonstop. And it was just real muddy, just never got the offense going, and it just wasn't a whole lot of fun. And at the end of the game, my buddy Ryan Kettner is just like, never once in the whole planning of this trip did I even consider the fact that we might not win this game.
You have to turn around and drive
and we're driving home from Florida the next day.
Gosh,
Yeah, the Ohio State one was the biggest one for me. I'm trying to I mean, I went to every game while I was there as a student, and the first 2 years was awful. 03, 04, those falls. Just not a lot to talk about.
I got one more.
Okay.
The blocked Ohio State field goal for a touchdown.
Were you at that?
I was at that game, yeah.
Were you at that one? Okay.
That was unbelievable.
2016?
2016, yeah. 2016, yep.
So 2005 Ohio State, was that Tom Bahali?
Yeah, that was the Holly, yep.
Yes.
So, yeah, that one's by far. I mean, that College Game Day was there. Hadn't been there in a while. Yeah. We got up at the beginning. Me and my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, were up there with my cousin Nick and Adam Filer. We're all up there. We go to College Game Day. We hang out for a bit. We go and get in line at like 1 o'clock. No, they're not opening the doors until like 6:30. But we had to get in line, and we waited in line forever to get in there. And then the place was the loudest environment I've ever been in. I've never been in anything louder. Like, I eventually just stopped screaming because I knew I was losing my voice. I wasn't adding anything to this, but it was so loud it was making my head hurt. And when Tamba sacked him and they recovered that fumble, and Penn State was about to win, it was one of the best sports moments ever. But beating Minnesota that year was cool. Michael Robinson had this amazing tackle breaking run, but unfortunately, he actually believe the player got severely injured and was never able to play again. So they stopped replaying it, I think, out of respect for the guy.
I do remember that.
Also that year, I think people weren't necessarily buying into Penn State. They thought maybe they got lucky over Ohio State because it was at home, and we had to play Wisconsin there at the end of the season. I believe Michigan State on the road was the last game, but Wisconsin came in with a pretty highly ranked team, and we obliterated them. So those are the big ones from my, at least as a student. I've been up at plenty of. I went to the Nebraska game in 2002.
Okay.
That was a big one for me.
Yep. Yeah, I think I was not at the Nebraska game. I think my brother was at that game with my dad, though.
Like some of those games, I was at the. Again, this is another one. I was a little kid. I was probably 4th or 5th grade. But I was at the Snow Bowl when they played Michigan
So was I.
Yes.
against Tim Bianca-Batuka for Michigan.
Bianca Batuga.
It was 94-95 in that range. Like, I don't remember exactly.
Yeah, it was
when.
mid-90s.
But yeah, we drove up for that one. That was fun. Like,
Yeah.
but yeah, like, it's fun because I think about all these games. I've been to a ridiculous amount of Penn State games.
Yeah.
Probably only second to like number of like Phillies games, but like the Phillies play 162 games a year, like,
Right.
So like it's obviously a little different, but yeah, like I had mentioned, my senior year of college, not at Penn State, but like just the circumstances, I think I went to like 7 of the 12 games. It was something absurd, including I went to like I only missed like 1 or 2 home games, but I went to the Michigan game and I went to the Orange Bowl.
Yeah,
So like
yeah.
it was just it was a lot, and that team was a lot of fun.
Well, I have a lot of these memories. My brother, if we were to pull him in, we were talking before. I have a twin brother,
Right.
Matt, and actually when he right after he graduated from Penn State, he actually stayed in town, worked at the United Methodist Church in town as a youth minister for a while, taught at State High for a little bit, but one of his side gigs that he got was as the statistics spotter in Beaver Stadium for Dean DeVore.
That is
So
awesome.
I think I had heard that story from Jamie before, but like not that I didn't believe her, but it's always one of those like
No, it's a
you know,
thing.
and because I heard that a long time ago, so like I was like, oh well, maybe I misremembered, or like one of those things. So that's incredible.
My brother has a habit of kind of just stepping into things like that, and we joke about it all the time in my family. But yeah, he spent, I don't even know how many seasons it was, but he had the binoculars in the press box calling out yardage for running backs. That was essentially his job.
That's awesome.
So he has attended pretty much every game in that kind of window.
That's awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. One of my buddies wrestled up at Penn State when we were in college, and they would want someone he knew. His dad worked for ESPN, so they were always looking for people to work jobs, basically managing the cables on the side.
Yeah.
And by doing so, you got to eat at the buffet line after the game. Like it wasn't much, but for a college kid,
Sure.
And he wrestled, but he was a heavyweight, so like yeah, exactly. So yeah, like it's one of those things where you find yourselves in those spots sometimes.
Yeah. That's neat. So, the other thing I wanted to talk about was just some specific players that have sort of stood out over the years, and I tried to confine it, at least on my list, to kind of my high school memories through current times.
Right.
Not necessarily all the throwbacks, which I have a lot of respect.
Right.
for those players.
Like John Capoletti's amazing,
Exactly.
but like I never saw him play.
Sorry.
Right. Yeah.
Can't help.
Todd Blackledge.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yes.
Chuck
Yeah.
Facina.
Lots of respect for them, but yeah. So we've already talked about some of them. I mean, that late '90s team, the defense with LeVar Arrington, Brandon Short, Courtney Brown.
What was it? 2 guys that went top 3
They were 1-2.
Oh, were they 1-2?
Yeah, they were
Oh man.
1-2,
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. My college roommate Joe was always mad that they took Courtney Brown over LeVar Arrington because,
Yeah.
like Courtney Brown was great. It didn't work out as well
Yeah.
as LeVar did. But
Yeah. And if I kind of stay on the defensive side, some of the ones that stood out to me, that we had kind of, I think, waves of linebacking groups.
Yes.
The next group that really stood out to me, in my memory anyway, is the Dan Connor.
yes,
Paul Posluszny, Sean Lee,
Sean Lee.
Yes.
Yeah, that
Navarro
Right.
Bowman.
right.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
whole crew of linebackers was kind of like the next generation
Right.
of linebacker
Yes.
And especially because you have a guy like Dan Connor who's from right down the road,
Right. Right.
Sophomore. Just seeing some of those household kids from this area that become household
Yes.
names, it's just kind of amazing. That's something that I really never got used to. So I went to high school in the Allentown area, graduated from Emmaus High School. I did play football there. We weren't great, but we played against some.
Right.
There were some teams in the Lehigh Valley area at the time, Allentown Central Catholic.
Yep.
I think over the course of my high school career, there were probably 5 different kids that went and ended up playing at Penn State. Mike Saramelli was one who played fullback. Thinking of some others. There was a quarterback, Matt Seneca, came out of
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah, okay.
Allentown Central Catholic group. So just kind of seeing those guys on the high school field and then seeing them in Penn State uniforms.
I think Matt Seneca just took the Easton head coaching job. Yeah.
His name just came up.
Is he? Oh,
Yep.
nice.
Yep.
Yeah, I just saw that come out. Another name, this is a little bit of a throwback that comes back to me, is Blair Thomas.
Okay. Yeah.
And there's a story behind this. This is
New
why.
York Jets legend.
New York Jets legend, Blair Thomas. So growing up in the Allentown area, there was a little kind of day camp right near Emmaus High School called Camp Olympic, and they used to run a football camp program called Mike Gooman's Pro Football Camp. And so Mike Gooman's former Penn State player, Los Angeles Rams.
I think so.
But from the Allentown area, came back and brought all of these buddies of his to run this football camp during the summer. And Blair Thomas was one of the guys that came back to help kind of coach at this camp. And so I remember in kind of my junior high to early high school era, all of us going, from our area going to this football camp and meeting Blair Thomas, and I'm running one-on-one drills against this guy who was, very, if not currently on the Jets, very recently was
Right,
on the Jets
right.
at the time. So that's just one player I remember meeting that it was just neat to line up against him for
That's awesome.
some drills.
Yeah.
I don't know who jumps out at you?
So like some of the guys that like stick out to me are some of those guys like on that 94 team. Like Kajana Carter, like
Yeah.
like I knew of the guys before that. Like I knew of some of the like some of the big players before that, but like Kyle Brady. Yeah. I remember OJ McDuffie was like one of the early players that I remember. And like just those guys, and that team was that 94 team that ended up winning the Rose Bowl, like that was awesome. Like I again, things that I'll never get over that they didn't win the national championship because they were better than Nebraska.
Absolutely.
They were better than Nebraska.
Absolutely.
Nebraska had some teams in that stretch that deserved national championships. That wasn't one of them. Penn State deserved the national championship that year.
There wasn't anybody that stacked up against them.
No, that was up until the LSU team a few years ago, you could argue that was still the best college offense. Yeah. Now, comparing eras is really tough, but like you look at the numbers Penn State put up in that era compared to what teams put up like now, they still compare favorably to a lot of teams now. And you add on what they were able to do defensively to that. Yeah, it's probably a blessing that I was younger, because if I was older, I would have been. It would have been unacceptable to me.
You're 100%
It would have been
right.
unacceptable to me.
Yeah.
Which,
I was
again,
9, you were
I've
10.
talked myself into, and I don't think this actually would have happened because it was the BCS era, but like I've talked myself into that 2005 season, that if Penn State, Texas, and USC were all undefeated, that Penn State was going to get left out anyway.
So it's better we lost.
And so
to
that it's
Michigan?
better that we lost, because if we one lost team going to the Orange Bowl is perfectly fine. If we were undefeated, I would I still wouldn't be over it. I still wouldn't be over it. As you can tell, as the intensity of my voice has picked up just in the 30 seconds.
Well,
but
and we still talk about 94
right,
all the time.
Right. Yeah. So, like, I wouldn't be able to handle that. Whereas, the one loss, like, well, at least it kept me, like, as heartbreaking as that would have been, we just didn't win. Whereas, like, that, something that's completely out of your control, I would have never gotten over it.
Yeah, well, you guys touched on a lot of the ones. Justin mentioned the ones that we watched when we were younger, growing up. And Andy, you talked about that group of linebackers. That was my favorite, like, watching Puzzlesny and Connor and then Sean Lee right after I left and Navarro Bowman. Like, those guys were some of my favorites. Bobby Ingram, Curtis Enos, like, just a whole bunch of guys from that 90s, early 2000s era were so much fun to watch. But I think one of my favorites that doesn't get mentioned too often was in 2008 with Darryl Clark.
Yes.
Like
Darryl Clark is an underrated one in that group.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, he's another one that jumps out to me. Enjoyed watching. Jordan Norwood, Deion Butler, obviously Derek Williams and Justin King, like all those guys. That entire 2005 team, like, I'll never forget them just being a student there and that run that they had. Those are always the ones that are going to jump out to me. But
so here you go. That 2008 team lost the 2009 Rose Bowl. Jamie and I were dating for all of like a day at that point, and we watched that game together. And she didn't like. I probably toned it down a bit, but like she didn't bail after seeing me. I'm like, well, you've seen me at my worst. Like so.
So I kicked off the next game. We won. We're number one in the nation.
Awesome.
So the only other one you mentioned about the Blair Thomas thing. So I got to play against Austin Scott in high school because now not in the regular season or postseason. It was a scrimmage, but Wilson always scrimmaged Parkland, and he was the big star for Parkland. And I remember we were in the same graduating class. He went right up to Penn State with me, and I just remember having to attempt to try to tackle him during that scrimmage my senior year. Yeah. It was not happening. Yeah. And I mean, he rushed for almost 3,000 yards in a season when he was with Parkland. That his senior year, they won the state championship that year.
Yeah, I remember
and that we were convinced. Or I shouldn't say we were. Their coach was convinced we were going to play each other in the final to go to the state championship because Parkland ended up beating Central Dauphin, who beat us by two points in the district championship game. And they played Parkland the next week. But the Parkland coach had told Kentafio, was like, we're going to see you guys next week. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. It would have been nice to see them in the regular season. But, yeah, Austin Scott's always the one that jumps out to me.
So, I mean, graduating from Emmaus, Parkland was one of our rivals. So,
you know all about Parkland.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are the ones that certainly stand out in my mind. You guys covered a lot of them. Joe Juravicius, too. I love Joe Juravicius. Yeah, big Juravicius. He mentioned McDuffie. I got the Penn State Dolphins connection there, so I always loved O.J. McDuffie.
See, the problem with Joe Juravicius is I remember he then
played
for the Giants, yes. And I think he also went to Tampa Bay.
And the Buccaneers, yeah.
And he was on those Tampa teams that beat the Eagles in the early 2000s.
Yeah, so Juravicius, great things at Penn State, but then in terms of professional, not so good.
Well, and it wasn't so great when LeVar went, to Washington and New York.
Washington
and stuff like
to
that.
New York,
like
right?
That wasn't fun.
Right.
And now you got Saquon in New York, so
yeah,
that's always been really difficult for me.
And Micah with the Cowboys.
Yeah, right, Micah to the Cowboys. Yeah, so it hasn't been great. But in terms of like recent people, like in the last 5-6 years, obviously Micah jumps out. Saquon, Trace McSorley, who Justin and I, Austin and Natalie met last year at the Effort Card Show, so that was really cool. Those more recent, more modern players, but. Yeah. So
for me, and I'm kind of going back a little bit again. I have Tony and Larry Johnson both on this as well. So, I mentioned my brother earlier. I'm not going to keep bringing him up, but he did for a while coach a little bit at State High. And got to coach Tony Johnson. And got to know him a little bit, and then we got to see him turn into what he turned into with Penn State. So it was kind of a neat turnaround. Yeah, it was Tony, Larry, and Bryant, right? They were all brothers or cousins all together. Bryant was not a brother. Right, I think a cousin, yeah. So, I remember that was early 2000s Penn State football. Yeah, with a lot of memories from those teams for sure.
Not a strong start on defense.
Not a strong start? All right. Against UTSA, the Roadrunners are giving you a problem.
The Roadrunners are off to a hot start.
This is a really interesting dynamic with you guys jumping in and out of the seat every time. I'm going to try to maintain my focus as we go here. You guys mentioned some of the stellar wide receivers, and I think it's the 2005-2007 era. I'm thinking of Derek Williams, Justin King. I'm thinking of that group. And what sticks out to me about that group was it's the first time I remember kind of paying attention to the whole recruiting cycle.
Yes.
And understanding like what does it mean to be a 5-star recruit, and like that kind of talk about high school players. That for the first time, that's kind of when I remember hearing about that and realizing that like what a star Derek Williams was coming out of high school, and the expectations around him. I don't remember a player before that kind of came in with that much hype with that group.
Yes, and it just came up with Justin King. Justin King went to Gateway High School, where Wilson boys played their state playoff game this year, and like it's just like when I was at school in Pittsburgh, you'd hear Gateway High School all the time. Like, I don't hear it too much now unless I'm looking at high school scores, trying to look at how things are going in District 7. But, like, you hear Gateway High School, and the first thing I think of is, oh, that's where Justin King went to school. Because I was paying attention to, like, the recruiting and
current Penn State staffer, Justin King.
current Penn State staffer, right, we're high on some of those guys that, especially as they've come back, like Dion Barnes, like Joey and I are really
Calvin
high.
Lowry.
Yeah, and Calvin Lowry. Dion Barnes, we in The Athletic, they've talked about, there was an article almost probably a year or so ago now about how Penn State turned around their Philadelphia recruiting, because they used to recruit Philadelphia really well, and then it had fallen off. And they interviewed like 5 like coaches about like what happened, and they talked about how like they started essentially. They changed the way they recruited there, and it's not all Dion Barnes, but he's part of that.
Well, he coached at Northeast,
right? Yes, and he's had a really strong relationship with a lot of the schools there, and so like guys like Dion Barnes have helped that recruiting, and that's there's lots of things that have changed since that, but that 2005 team, I distinctly remember the recruiting, paying attention to it then, and honestly, that's a huge part of it anymore. Like, you need the guys. There's lots of other stuff that goes into it as well, but if you don't have the guys, you might be able to pull off a win here and there, but you're not going to consistently be beating the teams you want to beat every year.
It's a pregnant pause right there. I'm just looking over my list of other players that I had written down. And I guess if we're talking about highly touted recruits coming in, Christian Hackenberg, in, like that era.
So I have the utmost amount of respect for those guys who committed after everything that went down, and stuck with it. And Brenneman suffered through the injuries and then transferred to UMass, but he still has a lot of love for the program. I think Hackenberg does too, on some level. I feel bad for him because. He was the first big Penn State recruit to commit and then sign after all the events of 2011 and 2012 went down. And then he kind of got the rug pulled out from under him with the change in offensive system. Because he looked really good as a freshman under Bill O'Brien. But then after B.O.B. leaves, Franklin comes in and eventually you see how Trace McSorley was able to excel in the program after Hackenberg left.
Well, I mean, that's why Franklin brought him along, right? Like, that's the type of player that
he
wanted him.
Yeah, and Trace decommitting from Vanderbilt to come to Penn State, he always said that the reason he left Vanderbilt was because of Franklin, obviously, but Franklin was the only coach or one of the few coaches who believed that he could play quarterback.
Yeah, everyone wanted to play safety.
In all the recruiting services, they listed Trace McSorley as a safety, but he was playing quarterback at Penn State and was going to at Vanderbilt as well. So it's a shame that things didn't pan out for Hackenberg the way that everyone hoped. I enjoyed watching him play. I mean, I saw him play as a freshman. We went to that, I don't think it was called the Kickoff Classic, but it was against Syracuse in the Meadowlands. Okay, yep. So we got to see him play in that game. Yeah. And, of course, we also got to see, I guess that wasn't him. No, that was O'Brien's first game when they lost to Ohio. I was at that game, too. So, but that wasn't Hackenberg. No. So, yeah.
That's still...
That was O'Brien's first game in 2012, I guess.
Okay.
Which would have been, You know him, the walk-on. McGloin. Yeah,
McGloin,
man,
yeah.
can't forget that name. Come on. Yeah. But he was another one, underdog. Yeah, just so much moxie. And what he was able to do throughout 2012 was impressive to keep that game, that season going. I mean, Justin already touched on it. What a season 2012 was.
Well, that's a name I actually did not write down on my list, but one that definitely sticks out to me. I mean, a kid that comes up as a walk-on, lands in the starting role, and just through sheer will doesn't give it up.
Right. So I think it was, I don't remember exactly which one, but it was one of the Penn State football podcasts where he was on there, and it was around the time where he had started working as the sideline reporter too.
Yeah.
So but he was just talking about how he just refused to not believe in himself. He knew he was good enough. He knew he'd get it done, and how he just kind of. There were a lot of things stacked up against him, but he just kind of kept fighting, and honestly, he kind of personified that next wave, of the resiliency and not the highly touted recruits or not the things that, but guys who just got the job done more times than not, even though things were stacked against them.
Yeah, I hate to admit it, I hung on to Rob Bolden for far too long, thinking that he was the guy.
Gosh.
And it just kept going back.
Well, you
to
just
McGloin.
look at the physical tools. Rob Bolden should be the guy.
Right.
And again, things work out where it's not, and it's hard. That's part of that happens even on the teams that have. Stetson Bennett was run off of the Georgia team to a JUCO and had to come back because he wasn't the highly touted recruit, and now he's two-time national champion. It just happens, even at the highest level programs. But yeah, seeing some of those as they would go through were just pretty interesting.
Yeah, like Joey said, I had a lot of respect for Christian Hackenberg and for that whole group of guys that signed on and stayed. Even after B.O.B. left. And
right.
And like Joey said, the shift in the offense. I mean, the offensive line was decimated at that point.
Right.
I mean, Hackenberg was just a target stand.
Right, exactly. They go to that Temple game and he gets sacked 13 times or something like that because they can't protect anybody. They didn't have, but they only had 50 scholarships.
Well, we're talking a decade ago, these games now in 2012, 2013, in that era.
Yeah, for real.
I would honestly say that this past season, 2022, is the first time the offensive line looked cohesive. Actually, a good offensive line.
Well, that's because we spin that forward. I look at Saquon. Saquon with the Giants has been a lot of what it was at Penn State.
Yep.
If he can get to the edge, he's going to make a spectacular play. Yep. But people are but he has 3 or 4 carries a game where he loses 2 yards. Yes, on those carries, he's getting tackled before he gets the ball. There are sometimes it's on the running back, and sometimes it's not. And there were so many times in his career at Penn State and thankfully with the Giants where, sometimes you're getting hit before you get the ball or as you get the ball. That's not on the running back. And I feel I feel like that hurt his Heisman chances and stuff like that. Because if you watched him, he was the offense. He was what made the offense tick. And when he didn't have it going, there were going to be issues. But if he didn't have it going, it wasn't because of any fault of his own.
I just always remember with Saquon, his performance at Iowa, where he caught that was that the one where Juwan Johnson caught it in the last play of the game?
Yes.
Where they just refused to go down. They refused to quit.
Oh, that was
that Saquon moment where they kept throwing check down swing passes to him, and he'd make people miss. He got hit. He'd jump it in the air, get hit, and still being able to run. He was able to do
by,
in 16,
by Iowa
17.
defenders who are now multi-year pros in the NFL.
Right.
And he's just shaking them off or making them miss. And
yeah, he was special.
He made a couple of guys look silly in that
Oh,
game.
he did. Oh, he did. Yeah. For sure. What else do you have? You have anything else?
So, I mean, I figured this was also a good time to kind of talk about some expectations for the upcoming season.
Yeah, let's do it.
And just kind of looking ahead, a lot of positives obviously came out of last season. Still haven't gotten to the point where I could say, confidently we could finish a season and really lock in, obviously a playoff berth or maybe under the expanded, playoff system, maybe that happens. But I've kind of looking at the teams that are making the playoffs. I don't think I'm disillusioned enough to say like Penn State should be one of those teams at the end. I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah.
I think I'm seeing some things from the talent that we have on the field, local talent.
Yes.
Recent acquisitions. We got a young team, and I'm excited about the quarterback prospect. So the whole quarterback dynamic at Penn State has been kind of mercurial. Maybe that's something I'll say. It seems like, and maybe this is true for all college programs, but it seems like, we always get into this situation, thinking back like to the Rashard Casey, Kevin Thompson.
Yes.
We always have, the guy that we think is the starter, he trips up a few times, and then all of a sudden we've got we're in love with the backup quarterback.
Right.
And
Most popular player on the team.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So,
exactly.
like Zach Mills.
Yeah.
So I was there in 2001 when the South End Zone expansion opened up.
Yep.
All the things not surrounding that actual game were amazing. The South End Zone, it was crazy atmosphere. Adam Taliaferro runs out, like just unreal like atmosphere. And then Miami absolutely smoked
That was
us.
one of the best college football teams
go
ever.
on to learn that's one of the best college football teams ever, and they looked every bit the part when I was watching that game. But like Zach Mills came in there and like lit a spark. Now it was a second half spark, and I use that term loosely because they were able to just like move the ball. But yeah, everybody falls in love with Zach Mills, and then you're like, oh well.
Well, I mean, we had the same thing. The same thing happened with Trace,
Right.
And Christian Hackenberg. The same thing happened with Sean Clifford. With Trace, he came in,
Yep.
threw a couple of deep balls,
Right.
A couple of like it wasn't his first pass ever.
Yeah.
A touchdown.
Yeah.
at Penn State.
Yeah.
And it's like the Sean Clifford era is here. Well, we still had 2 more years with Trace at that
Right.
point,
Right.
And now you go through this whole season with the questions about Sean Clifford.
Right.
I've liked Sean Clifford. I
Yeah.
think he was experienced.
He was the guy we needed this
He
year.
definitely was the guy. And I think if it would have been a grave mistake to rush Drew Allar into that position
right.
this season. I think the way that they exposed him to game experience, gave him some early snaps, gave him some opportunities, scripted or not, whatever they were.
Right.
I think that was a really good way to kind of ease him into this role. That now that he's essentially being coordinated.
Right, right.
And apparently there's still a competition going on.
Right.
I don't know that that's the case, but now the Drew Allar era is officially here, and you're hearing nothing but praise coming from
Well,
that side.
and I look at it, Clifford was in a tough spot, and honestly, I don't know that I could have asked him to handle it any better, including from the like off the field stuff where I don't know that there's a guy who I would want the young guy to be the understudy for more than Clifford. Who just clearly loves the school, loves the university, loves the program, loves all those things. Because he could have gone somewhere else. He could have or just kind of wrapped it up. Or he could have done all those things, and he stuck with it. Even though outside the program, at least there were all kinds of people who were always calling for his job. Because you said it Allar might. I hope he lights up West Virginia on Labor Day weekend.
I hope
and
so, yes.
And and does all that stuff. But he's gonna there's gonna be bumps in the road. He's not gonna. I don't know that. I would be willing to bet he's not gonna win the Heisman this year. But there's gonna be bumps, and there'll be people who are like, oh well, let's see what Pribula's got. You can't just be that quick to jump.
Right. Yeah, 100% agree.
I love I'm going to hop over here see if we have any comments. I didn't want to forget anyone watching.
I'm sure Andy's going to bring in the crowd. So let's see if anyone jumped in. I don't see any on there, so I think we're good. So speaking of Bo Pribula, we got to see him play against Wilson, which is always fun to get to see Penn State prospects, targets, commitments, and now actual people on the roster. He was impressive. He's a very good player. But when you're going up against a guy like Aller, who just the prototypical everything, you got an uphill battle. But the best thing is, sorry, am I taking over right away?
Okay.
What was I saying? Oh, Pribula, he's gonna fight, which is great. Keep pushing Aller because that's all he needs. And Aller looks the part. He's gonna be the guy. I don't think Pribula is gonna beat him out. That would be shocking to everyone.
Yeah.
But I'm glad he's sticking it out, at least for this year, to push Aller. Now, if he doesn't make any progress and it doesn't look like he's ever going to get it, maybe he will leave. I don't know.
Right.
Maybe he just always wanted to play at Penn State and he'll take his moments when they come, which would be great. But, we've also got to see another one of Penn State's big-time playmakers in this area. Justin and I said for many years we couldn't wait for him to be gone from Governor Mifflin because we wanted to be able to cheer for him.
Yeah.
And, Nick Singleton lived up to the hype this past season because what a phenomenal freshman season.
Yeah, that was so much fun to watch. And pretty much every time he was breaking off a touchdown run or a big run, I'd say to Joey, I'm like, this is so much more fun this year than last year.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
like it's so much more fun watching him run like dressed in blue and white than it was those colors from across town. So,
well, and it's it's kind of vindicating, right?
yes,
to see how
Yes.
he's
Yeah,
performing.
he
on
was
the
that
national level.
good.
right,
Yeah, he
right,
is who we thought he was.
right. Yes, yeah. He was like running past those Utah defenders, in the Rose Bowl, not just the Rose Bowl, but like that Auburn game. Oh my gosh, that was maybe my favorite game this past year.
I agree. Absolutely, yeah.
Just talk about like a vindicating like performance. And I know Auburn was a hot mess this year. I don't care because
But honestly, they weren't a hot mess until after that game.
No, that's what
really
sealed
weren't.
it all. Right.
Yeah.
There were some questions and everything, but like not just losing, but the way they lost, that became the SEC went from rooting for Auburn in that because they're really big on rooting for their conference to rooting against them because they're like, no, they have to be bad because like we can't have them be good and have that loss on there. Like we need them to be bad.
Yeah.
And another situation where, like, I'm not a huge fan of the coach they had, but, like, man, talk about a tough deal when it sounds like the donors and everything had already made that decision. Like, you were dead man walking all
you were
season
done no
pretty
matter
much.
what.
Yeah. But, yeah, that was fun to go down there and beat them. But, yeah, like, well, now, the connection, they've got Jevon Williams up there who was getting high praise in spring practice, like we talked about. Adding some depth, it was Drew Shelton saw play in basketball against Wilson last year. Downingtown kid.
Kid from Exeter's there now.
Yes, Schlaffer, I think, is up there. Like,
Joey Schlaffer, Javon Williams.
well, and you're
Nick
seeing,
Singleton.
and this isn't necessarily new this year, but it's one of those things where, like, a lot of these big-time kids are going up in January.
Yep.
And, like, you know what? For some of them, it's not the biggest difference, But for some of these kids, that's the difference between whether or not they're going to see the field.
Absolutely.
At least in September or October, and, you think that's like 6 months. Well, look at they get the winter workouts, they get the spring practice, you get all those things. And in college where it's still, it's regulated in the pros, but it's different there. But like here where it's a huge step from wherever I don't care what program you're coming from in high school, it's a huge step to what the expectations are when you go up there. And to kind of have that and to be able to get all those things, and it's just it's good for the program. It would be tough to be a kid who has to make that decision, giving up those high school things. But at the same time, like, if you're ready and depending on what your goals are, like, I get that too. Right. Like,
that's what your goals are.
right. The kids who are doing that are the kids, their goal is to play in the NFL, I would imagine. And so, well, let's get that clock rolling. They're ready to go. So, but
I don't know how a kid can walk into summer camp from high school and expect to step in, in the fall.
Right.
The first day of the first game.
Right.
There's still learning that needs to take
Well,
place.
and we saw a lot with the basketball this year where because of the COVID year and because of the new transfer rules and, like, all those things, like, combined, you end up with some, like, I think Houston had, like, 3 guys who were, like, 24 or 25 on their team. Like, and you get that in college. Like, so, like, I just think, and again, I was obviously not a Division I football player. I was not a Division III football player.
You lied to me.
So, like, I was going to make a Notre Dame coach reference because didn't they, like, almost hire a guy who had lied on his resume and then they fired him before they started?
Georgia Tech, right?
Yeah,
Something
yeah.
like
Was
that?
it? Yeah. Was that
what
like
was his
George
name?
Leary or something like that?
Yeah, George O'Leary.
Yeah. So anyway, but, like, I just think about where I was, like, physically and mentally at, like, 18 years old.
Yeah.
Like, you show up and, oh, my gosh. Like, going against these men, like, well, that's, like, I love that they walk into the stadium, and there I am standing on the curb, sometimes it's, like, Austin on my shoulders or Colton on my shoulders or whatever. And these dudes are looking me in the eye, and I'm standing on the curb, and they're still towering over me, but, like, we're closer to the same height. It's just, the size of these guys at these programs is just unbelievable.
So, Andy, to get back to the question you asked here, talking about this season. Now, we've been meandering. That's okay. It's all been fun talking Penn State football in whatever way
To be fair,
possible.
I told him that would happen.
Oh, yeah. It happens all the time. We'll talk for half an hour and then be like, all right, well, let's get into our main topic, But expectations for this season.
Yeah.
So, where are we at? It's your question, your topic. Why don't you hit us with what you expect from Penn State football this year?
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to kind of reserve my expectations a little bit. Mainly
Pull it back a little.
We have talked long and hard about the amount of heartbreak that we feel. So maybe I'm trying to build a wall.
You
around
condition yourself to be let down, so
yeah.
you can never be disappointed.
But I feel like we have a brand new quarterback. We've got some experience around him on the offensive line, in our running back room. Some questions at receivers, got some transfers though, so there may be some more weapons there. I feel good about the season. I think the same hurdles are going to be the same hurdles, right?
Michigan,
it's always Michigan,
Ohio
it's
State.
always Ohio State, and then there's always one more thrown in there.
Right.
Surprise Wisconsin or surprise Michigan State's good all of a
Or
sudden.
like now, I know we didn't see him this year, but Illinois was very good
Right,
this past
right.
year.
So I always worry about those games, but really I feel like if we get past even either or Michigan or Ohio State, get to maybe a 10-2 or an 11 and whatever.
11-1.
Yeah, I feel like even if it's not a playoff team, that would be a really successful season for us.
Yeah, I completely agree in that regard. I know there are people that are going to be like, well, if they go, 11-2, but lose to Michigan and Ohio State, who really cares? I'm like, I care. 11 wins is fantastic.
Yeah.
Playing in another New Year's Six game, it takes time to build a program. Georgia didn't unseat Alabama overnight. Georgia's been building for a long time. Alabama's still hanging around. Look at Clemson. They had a great run of, 5-6 years, but they've come back a little bit, but they're still really good. I'm sure all fans of all those teams, you get to 11, 12 win season, that's pretty great. I know Alabama and Georgia are always, they got to win the national championship, which are a failure. And I hope one day Penn State is that. Well, we didn't win the national championship. It's a failure of a season. I'm not at that point. You get to 10 wins in the regular season, I'll be super thrilled. And I don't think that's settling. Do I want to beat Michigan and Ohio State? Yes. We've beaten Michigan plenty of times recently. I know there was a tough go of it in the 90s and early 2000s. We've had a few wins against Michigan. Ohio State's the bigger one for me. They're the bigger fish, despite Michigan beating Ohio State the last 2 years. And I know their fans, their Go Blue fans are all about it. I'm still not ready to declare Michigan the best team in the Big Ten, even with 2 straight wins over Ohio State. Ohio State's been dominant for the better part of a dozen years, 15 years, 20 years. Look back. We were just talking about the 2001 Miami team. Those great Miami teams. Who'd they lose to? Ohio State. So I feel that Penn State has enough talent coming back that we should be looking at a double-digit win season before a bowl game is thrown in there. I think 10-2 is very reasonable. Mm-hmm. With Michigan and Ohio State being, toss-ups at bet, maybe guaranteed losses. I don't want to talk that way, but look at the trend recently. It would be more upsetting to me, and I talked to Justin about this just a few weeks ago, is when they lose a game that they shouldn't have lost. Yeah. You lose to Michigan and Ohio State, that's unfortunate, but you were expected to lose. Yeah. When they lost in 16 and 17, 16 and 17, when they lost to Michigan State in those back-to-back years with the team that we thought was better, 16 we're like, wow, this is great. We upset Ohio State. We looked bad at the beginning of the year, but you end up you lose a game you shouldn't have, and it happened again in 2017. Yeah. That one really stung because so many people were back on that 2017 team, and I feel like they underachieved. Yeah. But
was one of those the weather delay games?
Yes, I think this was that the 17 one. Yeah, it was delayed like 3 hours or something like that. Yeah. So the Justin's brought this up, sent me articles about it. You've probably seen it too.
I don't believe a single team in at least the Power 5 conferences would have benefited more from a 12-team playoff than Penn State. Or they're one of like 2 or 3 teams that would have seen their playoff experiences jump. Penn State would have made it, I think, with a 12-team field, if it would have started when they started this 14 playoff, I think Penn State would have made it. Well, do you remember what it was, Justin? Like 5 times or something like that? 5 times
crazy,
in almost 10 years. Like every other year you're in the playoff.
I gave up the touchdown, but not the 2-point conversion.
So I'm right there with you, Andy, and I'll let Justin go then, but I'm expecting a 10-win season. I hope that 10 wins are before the bowl game, and the bowl game can be win number 11, just like this year. Winning the Rose Bowl, like, this was a fantastic season. I wouldn't trade this for anything other than a national championship. This is exactly how I'd want my season to go. If you can say I'm going to go win 11 games and win the Rose Bowl, I would take that more often than not. Like, why would you pass that up?
Yeah, and I kind of, to build on that, like, yes, I understand, like, the goal is to be a playoff contender and a national title contender. But, like, I said, look at, like, 2 years ago, now, like, 2 seasons ago, but, like, last year's team, the next step wasn't playoff contender. The next step was New Year's Six contender. And that's what they did. Like, actually, for the previous 2 years, the next step wouldn't have been. And I'm like, so that was the next step. Now, the next step is to make that the standard and or build on that. And so, like, my expectation is a New Year's Six bowl, which essentially means 10 wins. I think if we get to 10 wins in the regular season, I think we go because Penn State usually is a good draw. Right. So, like, I look at that. And our friend, like, our friend Corey, like, he is always talking. He's always like, when are we going to be to the point where he's like, look at Michigan and Ohio State. Like, they expect to win every game every year. Yeah. And he's like, when are we going to get to a level where we're not that we won't lose, but that we, like, don't expect to lose. Like, because we're sitting here being like, well, Ohio State and Michigan will easily lose at least one, probably both. Well, I don't disagree with that, but, like, I feel like Michigan, we have a shot because it's at Penn State. Ohio State's going to be tough, but, like, hopefully Drew has some experience by the time we get there, and you're going to need the other guys. We're going to need the line to be doing well. We'll need the running backs to continue to get better, and we'll need to have established our wide receivers at that point. Absolutely. And if we do that, awesome. I think we've got a decent shot. If not, I don't know, but we'll see. You know, I think my expectation is 10 wins. That's tough, though, because you're either saying Michigan and Ohio State are it, or we're winning all those other games that I chalk up as even toss-ups where I slightly favor us. Like, I know I feel we're better than Iowa, but they're always tough.
That's at home, though, right?
That is at home, and likely a whiteout game because of when some of the other games are. But not that's not set yet. But, like, I hope we beat them, and we should beat them. But even here, like, we should beat West Virginia. But first game of the season.
See, that one.
Right, and this is why, and, like, look, I understand. Like, we have tickets. I love when they schedule teams like West Virginia, or they schedule Auburn, or, like, that's great.
Better start strong.
You don't get 3 preseason games like you have in the NFL. Like, you better start You better start going. Your scrimmage is in April. You know, like, so now you've got to hit the ground running. Like, let's go. And should they be able to beat West Virginia? Absolutely. But guess what? West Virginia's coach is coaching for his job too, because a lot of people thought he was going to be fired last year. So it'll be interesting to see how, like, the games like that go, and they've got some, challenging games there. I'm glad we moved it so UMass is coming out of the bye, because that hasn't been real good for us lately. Like, if that's a problem, then we've got bigger issues. So, like, I understand, like, no one gets real excited about UMass. No, but, like, put them when we've struggled. Put them at those games. And so, like, while I hesitate for those, the game is about winning as many games as you can, because they've shown that it doesn't really matter what those games are. And they can talk all they want about strength of schedule. If you win your games, you're going to be rewarded. Absolutely. And so let's schedule games we can win. Now, again, I think we can beat West Virginia. I think we can beat Iowa. We don't really have control over. That's in the conference. But, like, you know what? That's just kind of the way it goes.
I feel like historically the Big Ten has been tough enough, right?
Right. Right.
the crap out of each other on
Right.
a weekly basis.
Exactly.
Like let's schedule some wins. I'm okay with that.
Right, yeah. And yeah, so I hope we get to 10. The problem is, and we talk about this, expectations change early on. So like if they look good, against West Virginia, even though I know West Virginia is probably not going to be that great this year, I'm going to be like, all right, here we go.
Yeah.
And then if they look good against Iowa, and we're sitting good towards the end of September, I'm going to be like, all right, now if we can get to 1, and then Ohio State or Michigan, we beat one of those teams, and the other team goes undefeated. Maybe we can piggyback on them and get. I start running through all those what ifs. Right,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yep.
exactly. But it's going to be interesting because they got maybe more guys to stick around this past year than maybe we could have expected.
Well,
but it's not going to happen next year.
No.
Now,
and that's
but then you got to hope that you got to build on this success because they had a good recruiting class. You keep stacking up New Year's Six games, you're going to keep being able to build on the recruiting.
right. That's I'm glad you brought that up. This idea of the transfer portal. Because I wonder, we're in, and maybe we're a couple years into it now, but we are essentially in another kind of iteration, another era of college football with the transfer portal, with NIL, with so many of these new kind of things that, going back to when we were in school, none of this was legal.
Right.
This is all
Right.
amateurs.
You had to be careful if a player showed up at the tailgate afterwards because you're like, oh man, I don't know what we're allowed to do here or not.
Yeah.
The whole. You can have bagels, but I can't give you cream cheese for the bagel. You can have butter. That's it.
Yeah, I just wonder how long some of these these dynasties like Alabama and Ohio State are going to be able to continue to maintain that. When you've historically you look at a team like Ohio State and they've got a stable of running backs, a stable of wide receivers. There's guys sitting. It's like Wilson, right? There's guys sitting and sitting and sitting. They don't have to do that anymore. Right. So how do you continue to build on that?
And it's very different in college basketball because it only takes a couple guys. You're only playing 5 guys at a time, all that stuff. But look at it. That's how Florida Atlantic, Miami. I was telling him, I think it was him. I was like, look at where all these schools are / their NIL. UConn is the only one where you're not like, hey, let's go to Storrs, Connecticut. But they're a basketball school, NIL money's there. Oh, and they have the son of a legendary high school basketball coach and basketball name. Then you have Florida Atlantic, who doesn't want to go to Boca Raton, Miami, who doesn't want to go to Miami, and San Diego State. You get kids on campus. I remember when Lonnie Walker visited Miami, people were like, why would you go to Miami? I'm like, have you been to Miami? Have you been to Miami? I was at Miami, and I'm not a Division I recruit. I can see why someone would go there and be like, yeah, I could play here.
Right.
I can make this work. It's a different world, and Joey and I talk about this all the time. I think I know how I feel about the NIL stuff and things like that, but it changes as examples come because it's still new for us too. Sure. But regardless of that, it's part of the game now, and I want Penn State to be good at it. I want us to be good with the transfer portal. I want us to be good at NIL. Right.
We got to do it to compete.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. So we'll see, but let's. The losses will be disappointing if and when they happen. But if we're sitting there going to, the Orange Bowl or the Rose Bowl or something like that again, or Fiesta Bowl, that's a good spot to be. So.
Is that it? Do we put a bow on it there? Or is there? Let's give Andy
That's-
our
Yeah,
final
we'll give him the
words.
last chance.
I've really appreciated the discussion tonight, guys, and we've covered all of my
Did
notes.
we through
I
it?
actually wrote Phillies on there, but I don't want to talk
Yeah,
about the
let's
Phillies
not.
right now. so
Actually,
we're not
does
prepared.
anyone know what the status?
So I
is?
got a
didn't
text that
know.
said they may get their first win. So
Oh
let
boy!
me pull it up.
Here it comes. So Justin and I did our MLB preview last week,
Right.
and I for once actually went above Justin's win total, which I don't usually do. Justin's usually very optimistic about the Phillies.
They did not win, but maybe we'll get their first win this week. Oh, I misread the text. Is it maybe we'll get to see their first win when we see them on Thursday?
I see. Yeah. So, this is a rough start. Getting swept by the Rangers. The pitching looks awful. Batters. I don't know how many runs they scored today.
They only scored 1, but they lost 2-1. So the pitching was there today.
So this is all right. It's early. You can't hit the panic button when it comes to baseball, but this is frustrating because they were supposed to be They're supposed to be good. Like, this is the expectation thing we
Yes.
talk about.
It'll be fine. It'll
Like-
be fine.
Last year, we thought they could be good. We hoped they would be, but they hadn't been in so long. It was such a surprise with the way they played. Basically, only from September on. Like, they were always, they were playing
Right.
good, and then Harper got hurt, but it was just such a shock. And the fall was so fun. Like, October was amazing, but now the expectations are there. It's
Right.
not
right.
off to a great start.
Expectations have changed. Right.
Three down, 159 to go. I'm sure they have time to right the ship, but it was a rough watch yesterday.
Well,
Yes.
we will be there Saturday. I'm not sure who
there we go.
starting pitching is yet, but yeah.
Well, hopefully, it's tough when you give up 2 and you're still averaging giving up like nearly double digits for the series because you gave up so many the first 2 nights.
Yeah, it was a rough one. I was super excited on Thursday when they jumped out to a 5-0 lead, I think it was.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I left to take Natalie to soccer and
Gave up like 9 runs without an
Yeah.
out, basically.
and it was just a bummer to see.
It's hard to do. That's hard to
The
do.
guy they got in the trade for Veerling and Mayton.
Right.
Mayton didn't get a single out.
No.
So yeah, I don't know. We'll see about the Phillies, but it's super early. Certainly not ready to hit the panic button. But you would have liked to get a win in the opening weekend.
Right.
Hopefully they can do it in the home opening.
Well, so the problem is now they go to the Yankees. They go to the Yankees next.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean there'll be Phillies talk sprinkled in throughout the next few months.
Yeah.
But
They've got the good news is they've got time.
They've got
time.
plenty of time. They got nothing but time. So, well, yeah, Andy, thank you so much for joining us. Sorry it took a year to get you on the show, but it was worth it to sit here and talk, reminisce about Penn State football. So appreciate the topic. That's always been up in the air with our bracket challenge winner of whether or not it was something Justin and I were going to want to talk about.
Yeah, this was much better than when Corinne won.
I heard
So,
that. I
yeah,
heard that.
Corinne definitely picks topics that I have to veto, which I told her that's in the rules now. When I put it out there.
Yeah, while there isn't an expiration, there is Joey
we
gets first
must
refusal.
approve- We must approve it. I let her sneak by years ago.
Well, now you mentioned that there was no expiration date, and I was told today that Jamie actually won and still has not been on the show.
Yes, she
So
is.
I just want to throw that out there, not trying to stir anything up.
I'm going to have to defer to Justin on that one. Yeah, you're right. I mean, my aunt also won, I think, twice. Both years Villanova won. She won. I offered for her to come on the show because she told me she wanted to talk about the dog show. She's in the dog show. I offered her a shirt and to come on the show. She's never taken us up on the offer. It still stands if you'd like to join us, Aunt Steph. But yeah, she rode Villanova when they won the 2 out of 3 years, and she won both those years. Our dads both won, and we got to have them on Father's Day one year, so
Nice.
that was really
That's
fun.
great.
They tied tied that year, so that was one of the first years we did it, I think, the first few. So, but yeah, this was great. So appreciate being on, Andy. Wouldn't be disappointed if you won again, or if you want to come on after a Penn State experience and talk about it.
Be happy to.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So
Thanks, guys.
appreciate you joining us and picking a great topic. So Justin, do you have anything else you wanted to say? Any shout outs or mentions or preparations or anything like that?
No.
Justin's always concise and to the point. I
Going
love
for
it.
the hard stuff.
I love it. So. Happy belated birthday to Jason. We got to his birthday was Friday. I actually went to Morgantown Casino last night to celebrate for the first time. It was a lot of fun. Huge storm went through while we were down there. Just spawned some tornadoes right after it passed through, which was interesting because you're in a box with no windows. Can't tell what it's doing outside, and we finally figured out that was rain we were hearing.
Oh, wow.
But the Final Four was the games were on, and any of the Philadelphia stations that they were streaming on DirecTV, well, once they came back on, because the DirecTV shut down, you couldn't see anything because of the storm, then we started getting the tornado warnings popping up, and we're like, wait, here?
Yeah.
And like, honestly, we're probably in a pretty safe spot because there's no windows anywhere. We're in the middle of a building. We'll be fine, but it was a little bit farther south and west of us. But we did really well at the casino. I'm happy about that.
Hey, well,
I
there you
almost
go.
never go, and when I do, I want to come out on the positive side of things. So congratulations to us, and happy birthday to Jason, who did not win anything. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. So anyone get pranked yesterday? Anyone fall for anything?
I pretty much have my guard up, especially on Twitter.
Yeah,
24/7,
gosh,
right?
Yeah.
One day
Right.
of the year.
I saw one today. I was like, glad it's April 2nd. I can go back to believing everything I see on the internet today.
Yes,
Like,
right. What could go wrong?
I did see a post about the Eagles signing Zeke yesterday.
Oh gosh,
see.
That
that
floated, which for a second I said, you know what, they were talking. No.
I think he was talking about
yeah.
Yeah, what did I see? Oh, I saw one today from actually PA Football News posted that Centralia football was coming back. They posted it yesterday, but I only saw it today.
Right.
And when I read it, I was like, that doesn't make sense. Like, I'm really baffled. And then I looked when it was posted. It was like a day ago. I was like, makes a lot more sense.
I was like,
now.
I think one of those accounts posted too about like 2 years ago, I think, or maybe longer than that now, when they posted about the team getting a dome out west, and everyone like freaked out, and
yeah,
these
like if the proposal goes through, it'll be the first Pennsylvania team with a dome, and the people that bid on it was really, immediately people just jump on that. And he reposted it. I actually think he posted it like in 2018 or something.
Yeah, it's been a while now.
2019, every year he's just like, my best one ever.
I feel like Russ Tucker is doing those.
Oh yes,
he does
all
it
year
all the
long.
time.
Oh, it's
year
great.
long.
It's great.
Nothing will make me laugh more than the Kenny Pickett one.
Yes.
I don't think he can play in Pittsburgh with his small hands. There's a number of people that just missed it. And what did I just send you? It was like Ross trolling again. What was it about?
Oh, it was about Verlander going on the DL. He's like, oh man, people make up injuries to even go on the DL to avoid playing for the Mets. Well,
he's a Phillies fan, so that makes it even better.
Right.
At least I assume he is. I thought outside of football, I thought he always was a Philly sports guy. So, yeah, awesome. Well, thank you again, Andy, for joining us. Thanks, Justin, for making it to the show. And I don't even remember what are we up, Justin? Like 376? Is it 376?
Something like that.
Yeah, 376. So, Justin, our goal is in 33 episodes. Episode 409. We want to get Audrey Snyder on.
Love it.
Yeah.
That is our hope. That's our wish. It'll take us over a year to get there, so we have plenty of time to prep for it. But that is Justin's. He's been saying it for a while.
Yeah, I've been saying it for a while.
We got to 309.
I think so.
For 409, we got to get Audrey on. So once we get a little bit closer and could actually focus on a date to see if she would want to join us via Zoom. Or maybe we can travel somewhere and interview her in person.
I said we need the why missing thing to keep going and keep pumping out Penn State recruits and have her come down and do like a story, and then we'll just tag on to that.
Yeah, pop in. So. Hey, you're here to talk, about Schlaffer and Javen and maybe Caleb.
Yeah.
Hey, could we interview for our podcast? Hey, it's been going on for 13 years now. By the time we roll it around, so that's the hope. But I think that's it. So we will not be here next week. Easter Sunday, everyone celebrating with family. Enjoy the time, but that actually will be 409. Easter is on April 9th. But we'll be back in 2 weeks. Who knows what we're talking about? We'll have to play more college football. That's fun. So
hopefully the Phillies have a couple wins by then.
Maybe by April 16th, maybe the Phillies will have won a game. That's always the goal. I think that's it. So appreciate everyone tuning in, either live or after the fact. Hope everyone has a fantastic Easter, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening.
That's a wrap on this episode of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show, brought to you by Mays Sandwich Shop. Woo-hoo! You can watch each weekly episode live on Facebook, Periscope, or YouTube. Be sure to like, follow, or subscribe to the show on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and Google Play. You can also rate and review us on many of these platforms as well. We'd love to hear from you. Send your emails to the Mays Sandwich Shop inbox at joemaysandjraff@gmail.com. The Joe Mays and J-Raff Show is a part of the JMNJR Radio Network, home to other productions such as The Bulldog Hour, Tangents with Friends, and Nat Chats with Dad. Until next time.